This video illustrates a data flow diagram drawn in MacAD. A data flow diagram begins with a context diagram represented by a single named process that represents the system being modeled. Data flows into the process from the external world and back out of the process to external entities, which are named here. The named process is divided into smaller processes on a child diagram. If we double click the parent process, it takes us to the child diagram, and here we see the smaller parts of that process that have been divided with data flowing between those different process bubbles. We also see that the same data flows in and out of the child diagram as came in and out of the parent process. We can return to the parent process by shift double clicking on white space, or again double clicking the parent process to go back to the child diagram. On the child diagram we see named data flows, we see processes, we also see stores of information where data can be placed into a store and then at some later time pulled out of that store by another process. The modeling process continues where processes are divided into smaller processes on a child diagram, and the same data that flowed into and out of that process is shown flowing into and out of the child diagram. This process continues until processes are simple enough where they can be fully defined within a short text specification. And we can see that each of these processes are now linked to a text specification that defines the inputs and outputs of that little process. In addition to double clicking down or shift double clicking up between diagram levels, we can select the title of a diagram in the contents panel on the left hand side. For example, if we click the context diagram title, we'll go to that specific diagram. We draw a diagram from a palette of tools on the left hand side. We can add and remove diagrams to this DFD, which currently has 4 individual diagrams in this DFD document. We can do that. To add a diagram, we click the plus button and we give the new diagram a name. We'll call it test in this example. We can also give it a number. We can give it the number of horizontal and vertical pages that determines the total size of the drawing surface for that particular diagram. And now we see we have a new diagram which is empty called test. To draw a process on the diagram, select the process tool, click on the diagram, and the process properties dialog is presented. Type the name of the process. You'll see there's actually 2 names. There's a dictionary entry name that defines the name of the object in a data dictionary associated with the diagram. And there is a displayed name which actually appears on the diagram and by default will be the same. So we're going to click OK, and now we have a named process. Let's add a data store. So we'll click with the store tool, type a name again, and click OK. Now we have a named store. Let's add a flow between this process and store using the flow tool. So we'll click on the process where the flow begins, click in white space, click in the store on the store object where the flow terminates, and we'll give the name to the flow. There's also other properties within this dialog. For example, the flow could be either a data or a control flow. Let's define one additional flow here. So we'll click there and give this the name flow tool 2. So now we have a process, a data store, and 2 named data flows between those objects. If we select the process object and click in the property button, it brings up the properties dialog again, and we could assign a child diagram to that process. Using the child diagram panel, we'll click on new diagram and click OK, and now a new diagram has been created. We can double click down to that empty child diagram. If we select from the options menu the parent attachments, we now have a list of all the data flowing in and out of the parent process brought down to this child diagram, so we can draw the processes on the child diagram and connect those flows. So they'll now balance with the processes in and out of the parent process. Diagram objects often have associated dictionary entries to define detailed information about that object. For example, let's select the business documents data flow, and if we click the Show Dictionary button at the top, it takes us to the associated data dictionary entry called business documents, and we can see this dictionary entry is composed of several individual parts. For example, the tax forms, there's an associated data dictionary entry that further defines that particular part of this entry, and we could go to that by clicking there, the button there, and now we're looking at the dictionary entry named tax form. Or we could use the back and forth buttons to navigate back and forth between the different dictionary entries that we're viewing within our data dictionary. Essentially, the data dictionary becomes a repository of all the detailed information behind the diagram. And in this case, we're defining a data flow called business documents and decomposing that data flow into its elemental parts.